Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us for the second part of our story. Let's jump right back in. Picking up Billy, I added, "We're going to visit Ben and Angie. We'll be back in an hour." Angie adored Billy and often volunteered to babysit during our events. She was thrilled to see him learning to talk and walk, especially when he managed to say her name. Billy also loved following Bennett around, calling out to him excitedly. One afternoon, Bennett approached me about an old race car stored in the barn. "Anderson didn't drive this, but he sponsored it," he explained. "The engine's blown, but the frame and transmission are still intact." "Can it be fixed?" he asked. I studied it. "It would need a new engine and several parts," I said. "It's not just a repair. It would be a full rebuild." "What's got you so interested?" I asked. Bennett blushed slightly. "I've always loved NASCAR. It's been my dream to drive a race car." "And how does Angie feel about that?" "She's a bit hesitant," he admitted. "But she agreed to watch one race with me. It's safe, right?" "Relatively," I said. "There haven't been any fatalities I know of, but injuries can happen. Start with beginner races and build your experience." We fixed up the car, and Ben took lessons from veteran racers. Soon, he was competing every Friday night at the local dirt track. Sherry and I had patched things up, and we went to watch him race. The atmosphere was loud and dusty, but Ben was clearly in his element, working with Charlie and a group of local teens as his pit crew. The relaxed rules allowed us to join them in the pit. Ben was leading one night but suddenly pulled in, drained from a lingering flu. His points for the championship were at risk. Charlie glanced around. "He can use a substitute. The cage fits someone Ben's size or smaller." His gaze landed on Angie. "I don't know anything about racing," she protested. "Just shift gears and stay behind the pack," I said. "Ben will still get credit for finishing." Ben urged her on. "Do it, honey. Just be careful." She hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Give me a helmet, but not a word if I crash." We buckled her in and instructed her to keep steady. She sped off, gravel flying behind her tires. The first 15 laps went smoothly until a rival, desperate to improve his standings, targeted her. "What the hell is he doing?" Angie shouted through the headset. "He's trying to take you out," I told her. "Next time he comes up, brake just before he reaches you, then hit the gas." She executed it perfectly, making him tangle with other cars. But he wasn't done. He caught up again and slammed her into the wall. The caution light flashed. Angie pitted, yanked off her helmet, and threw it into the car. "Can you fix it?" she yelled. "Not in time," I admitted. Her eyes burned with determination. "Rip the fender off and get me back out there. I'm putting him into the wall." Charlie and I did as she ordered. "Don't be reckless," I warned. "Stay sharp." Back on the track, Angie drove aggressively, weaving through the pack. When her rival made another move, I shouted, "Cut left now." She swerved at the last second, forcing him to crash into another car. Chaos erupted. Despite the setback, she managed to claw her way back, finishing third in the race but seventh overall due to lost laps. Her rival ended up dead last. As he stormed toward the pit, Angie stepped out, pulled off her helmet, and smirked. "How does it feel to get beat by a girl?" She patted her back and laughed, hugging Ben. Before the rival could respond, I stepped in. "Choose your words carefully," I warned. "She beat you fair and square. Learn from it." Angie was hooked. She used her trust fund to buy a car and entered the women's division, winning twice. Ben secured his championship trophy, and the couple planned for the next season. Their matching cars decked out with sponsor logos, including ours. Meanwhile, business was booming. Sherry started dressing better, exuding newfound confidence. She spent less time with Billy and me, joining a professional women's group and attending regular meetings. I was proud when she won an award, but at the ceremony, I noticed something unsettling. Her friends looked surprised when I was introduced as her husband. I joked about having a city husband, but her embarrassed reaction stuck with me. Something felt off. Then Ben's boss called. suggesting a party to celebrate Ben's birthday and racing victory. I agreed to cook, asking them to bring sides and desserts. When I told Sherry, she hesitated. "I can't come," she said. "I have an event that night." "These are our friends," I reminded her. "Just stop by, check in, then go." The night of the party, Ben and I set up a shortcut through the woods to connect our properties. The party was in full swing when Sherry called, saying she'd be an hour late. We ran low on ice, so I took Ben's car to grab more. Halfway there, I ran out of gas and had to walk back. As I neared the house, I glanced through the open blinds and saw a couple on the couch. My first thought? Burglars. Break-ins had been happening lately. I pulled out my phone, ready to call emergency services, until I looked closer. It was Sherry, with a young employee from Ben's office. My first instinct was to storm in, but then I remembered something Ben had told me. "Divorce cases are messy," he once said, "especially when there's infidelity or violence. Guys often lose everything if emotions take over. Stay logical." The sight of my wife with another man was unbearable. My fists clenched, my vision blurred with rage. But I forced myself to think. Instead of rushing in, I stepped back and called Ben. "Hey buddy, what's taking so long? Should I send Angie over?" he asked. My voice was steel. "No, but I need Angie here now. I just caught Sherry with someone else. Barely dressed." Silence. Then Ben's tone hardened. "I'm on it." Angie, who had overheard, took charge. "Are you sure?" she asked, eyes wide. "I wouldn't be calling if I wasn't." Within 20 minutes, Angie, Ben, and 2 of his partners' wives arrived. I showed them the photos I'd taken. Julie, one of the women, studied them and nodded. "I'm a divorce lawyer," she said. "I'll handle this. Stay calm. Don't confront them. Let me take care of everything." Ben made another call. "They're almost here. Let's go." The confrontation was about to unfold. The senior partner from Ben's office arrived at my driveway, pretending to need ice. The rest of us waited quietly on the deck, out of sight. We heard a knock. "Sherry, we're out of ice," the partner called loudly, pausing for effect before using his key to enter. Inside, Sherry and her lover scrambled to dress. He sprinted to the deck, thinking he could hide in the shadows. But with a flick of a switch, the outdoor lights flooded the space, exposing him. For cell phones instantly captured his stunned expression as he stood there, clutching his clothes. From the kitchen, Sherry, now hastily dressed, saw everything. She let out a piercing scream before bolting outside. The senior partner turned to the man, his tone cold and commanding. "Be in my office at 9 o'clock Monday morning. Now go." The weight of his words left no room for argument. Angie and Ben sat beside me, their hands wrapped around mine in silent support. Julie handed me her card. "My office, Monday, 2 o'clock, she said firmly before pulling me into a hug. We returned to the party, but the night was tainted. The celebration ended early. I spent the night in their guest room, lying awake until dawn. Morning came with the sound of tiny footsteps. Angie had sent Billy to wake me. There was no such thing as sleeping in when a 2-year-old needed attention. As I held him, a sobering realization struck me. I had been so consumed by betrayal that I hadn't even considered Billy's safety. Angie had picked him up early that morning, telling my mother-in-law I was busy. She didn't ask questions, just offered to help. Over breakfast, Billy managed to get syrup everywhere, making a mess so ridiculous that we had no choice but to laugh as Angie cleaned him up. Later, as we sat together, Angie finally asked, "Divorce?" I nodded. We stopped sharing dreams. She wanted city life. I'm a country guy. And Billy, I want full custody. She doesn't have room for him in the life she wants. Ben sighed. She might fight for custody just to gain leverage in the settlement. Julie, ever the strategist, gave me a look. Stay calm. Let me handle it. No direct confrontations. 6 days later, Sherry showed up at the house. I clenched my fists but resisted the urge to throw her out. "Please," she said. "I just want to get my things and see Billy." Then I'll leave. I let her spend time with him, but Billy seemed indifferent. Eventually, she asked for her car keys, claiming she needed to grab clothes from the trunk. Instead, she started the engine. I acted fast. Yanking open the door, I pulled Billy out as she erupted into a storm of screams and curses. Angie, recording everything, approached on her four-wheeler. Sherry turned her wrath on her, hurling accusations of infidelity. Enough, I cut in. Any future visits will need court approval. Get out before I call the police. Everything was documented. The next day, Julie filed for an injunction and a psychiatric evaluation, using the footage as evidence. Meanwhile, Sherry's affair partner, now her so-called life partner, lost his job over the scandal and had to settle for a lower-paying position. I informed my clients that I'd be stepping away from the business but would finish current contracts. Julie advised against quitting entirely. It would protect my reputation and ensure Sherry had an income, making the custody battle easier. Sherry made demands, the house, the party equipment, but the house was still in my parents' name, and the prenup made it clear she couldn't afford the rest. Julie froze our accounts, allowing withdrawals only for payroll and supplies. All profits went into an account under Sherry's control. It was the fairest deal possible. Struggling, Sherry eventually accepted the terms. Her lawyer, her fifth affair partner in just 18 months, pushed for a final meeting. I declined. I stayed civil for Billy, though he barely noticed her absence. She kept the party business, but I received a quarter of the profits. Julie ensured she got the business and some capital, her only payout from me. In the end, I won full custody. She had generous visitation rights, but there were conditions: no men around Billy, no exposure to anything unsafe. If she violated those rules, she'd lose everything. Over time, the visits dwindled. Billy didn't seem to mind. Angie and Ben became my anchor, helping me through the storm. Even Sherry's mother continued babysitting Billy, under one condition: if she ever helped Sherry break the custody agreement, all contact with Billy would end. Angie became more than a friend. With Ben's approval, she stepped in as a surrogate mother. Billy adored her, but he also followed Ben everywhere. At work, Ben kept a photo on his desk. Him, Angie, and Billy. People assumed Billy was his stepson, and he never corrected them. One day, Ben approached me hesitantly. Presenting myself as a family man helps attract clients. Are you okay with people assuming? I didn't hesitate. Instead, I handed him a copy of my will. You and Angie are Billy's guardians if anything happens to me. Ben's eyes welled up. You already are a family man, I told him. You always have been. I'd never seen a lawyer cry before. It was a moment I'd never forget. Over time, I dated. Some women were fun, but none felt like forever. Angie would scold me, saying Billy needed a mother. I'd smile and say, he has one. When I find the right one for him, I'll marry her so fast it'll make your head spin. The closest I came was with a lawyer, Julie's senior partner's daughter. She was older, newly divorced, and had just landed a great job on the opposite coast. Her father called one day. Will, do me a favor. She's new in town, and I'd like her to attend the banquet with me. She needs an escort. She's quite beautiful, if that helps. I had no plans, so I agreed. I rented a Cadillac for the evening, and the moment I sat in it, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Was she beautiful? Absolutely. Barely 5 feet tall, blonde, and fair-skinned. She looked like a porcelain doll come to life. I felt an instant spark, and judging by her smirk, she sensed it too. Ooh, a real live redneck, she teased. I've never been this close to one before. Do you bite? I gave her a serious look. Yes. Perfect. She grinned mischievously. Ben and Angie burst into laughter, setting a light-hearted tone for the evening. The black tie charity event was exquisite. The food was exceptional, and Rhonda, my date, talked through every course. Do you ever stop talking? I teased. She blushed. Only when there's something interesting in my mouth. Ben choked on his coffee. Angie giggled uncontrollably. An orchestra started playing. Thanks to Angie's dance lessons, I took the floor with confidence. Rhonda moved like she was born to dance. Graceful, smooth, mesmerizing. She danced with her father twice, with Ben once, but the rest of the night, she was in my arms. As Ben and I stood near the bandstand, waiting for the women, Sherry walked by. "Ben, Will, good to see you both," she said, her tone sharp. Then, turning to me, she added, "Will, you should really socialize more." She gestured to the man beside her. "Let me introduce my date, Robert Morgan. You might know his father, Ben Wilson Morgan, founder of the Morgan Bank chain." Sherry had put on weight. Her eyes looked tired. Her date seemed more like an accessory than a companion. Just then, Angie and Rhonda rejoined us. Rhonda kissed me on the cheek. "Did you miss me, darling?" "Good," she purred. "I want you to sulk all night, so it'll be even better when we make that wild, passionate love you promised me." She turned to Sherry and Robert with an innocent smile. "Oh, I'm sorry, who are your friends?" Angie, barely suppressing laughter, had clearly filled Rhonda in. I smirked. "Where are my manners?" "Rhonda, this is Robert Morgan of the Morgan banking family. And this," I let the pause stretch, "is Sherry Blankenship." I made sure to emphasize her maiden name. "A local businesswoman. And my ex-wife. Robert, this is Sophie Williams from the firm of Williams, Roberts, Howe and Hatfield. Perhaps you've heard of them. Now, my dear, shall we dance?" We left Sherry and Robert speechless. As we moved to the rhythm, I leaned in and murmured, "Angie told you who she was, didn't she?" Sophie smirked, drawing closer. "Yes, and gave me some background too. Don't worry, she's having a rough day, but from the looks of it, so are they." As the dance ended, Sophie pulled me in for a lingering, deep kiss. I caught my breath. "Did she see that?" "Oh, she did," Sophie confirmed with a sly smile. "And thank you," she added. "You're welcome. My pleasure." Later, Robert approached Sophie for a dance, and Sherry turned to me. "For old time's sake?" she asked, hopeful. Sophie responded with a sweet but firm smile. "I'd love to, but I promised my partner all my dances." "Sorry, Sherry. Maybe another time," I added. Angie struggled to contain her laughter as Sherry and Robert walked away, defeated. I turned to Sophie. "I'm glad you're not staying here permanently." Her expression fell. "Why say something so cruel? I'm starting to like you, because wherever we'd go, there'd be fights. Me fending off men, you fighting to keep me close." She smiled slowly. "What makes you think I'd resist?" She didn't. We spent every free moment together. Angie even kept Billy so we could have our weekends alone. She was the best lover I'd ever had. Small but surprisingly strong. She never shared her age, but I guess she was in her 40s with the vitality of someone in their 20s. She called it a round trip, and I was racking up frequent flyer miles. She adored Billy and showed me pictures of her daughter, a 13-year-old spitting image of her. My ex has her now. I gave him extra time since soon we'll be 3,000 kilometers apart. Thinking of Billy being so far away saddened me, but life moves on. To keep busy, I opened a barbecue restaurant. Myra's business was thriving, so I didn't interfere. Restaurants demand time and often fail, but my good reputation helped mine succeed. I expanded, fitting out 4 food trucks and sending them to nearby towns 4 days a week. They thrived. Despite my success, I hadn't found anyone permanent in my life and had all but stopped looking. It happens when you least expect it, when you're content. But I'm not talking about love. I mean tragedy. Billy was 9, and after school, he'd ride his four-wheeler through the woods to Angie's house. She'd give him a snack, check his homework, and let him help around the house. It worked for all of us. On nights I had a date, he'd stay over. Angie always had a room ready for him. Then, one day at 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Billy sobbing. "Come quick, Daddy. Aunt Angie is on the floor crying, and I can't get her up." I rushed over and found Angie just as he said. On the floor, quietly sobbing, unresponsive. I reached for my phone to call emergency services when it rang again. It was Ben's boss. "Will, I need you to check on Angie. I'm with her now, and she's not okay." "She's not talking to me," I replied. This isn't like her. Was Ben in an accident? A pause. Then the words that sent my world spinning. Ben is dead, Will. Heart attack. They said it was almost instant. We found him in his office when he missed a lunch meeting. He'd been gone for an hour. I nearly dropped my phone. Ben was gone. My best friend. But to Angie, he was everything. I pulled her into my arms. Her tear-streaked face cleared for a moment. Then she clung to me desperately. Ben! Ben! I held her on the couch, rocking her like a child. We both wept. She was in shock. We finalized the funeral arrangements when Ben's boss brought his updated will. He wanted to be cremated, he told us, to have his ashes spread around the farm. This is the only place I ever felt at home, he wrote. The visitation and service were filled with people who loved him, clients turned friends, racetrack buddies, law firm colleagues. Even Sherry came, embracing Angie, who sat with Billy in her lap and Sherry's mom beside her. They had grown close over Billy. Angie's eyes followed me everywhere, uneasy whenever I was out of sight. Ben had been 52, seemingly healthy. The doctor said it was an underlying condition. No warning signs, no explanation. After the funeral, friends and family returned to their routines. Then came mourning. Billy, Sarah, Sherry's mom, and I stayed with Angie for 2 weeks. By the end of the second week, she began to revive. The will's reading was another painful moment. Finality in black ink. Ben had left letters, his way of saying goodbye. Angie received one. She never shared its contents. Another was for Billy to be opened on his 18th birthday. And one was for me. Dear Will, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Thank you for your friendship. You turned an uptight Yankee lawyer into someone who could relax and enjoy life. I was proud to call you my friend. I left a college fund for Billy, enough for full tuition. I know you can cover it, but I wanted to do this for both of you. He's a great kid. I hope, with your guidance, he becomes an even better man and remembers me fondly. Now, the important part. Take care of her, Will. She'll need you. I know you love her. Out of respect for me, you never crossed a line. She'll need someone who loves her to get through the hard days ahead. I wish I could be there. I'd love to see Billy grow up. Find someone for yourself before you give up. Thank you for being who you are. For being my friend. Ben. Most of Ben's estate, his farm, and investments went to Angie. The racetrack he cherished was left to fund to upgrade the grandstands, build an announcer's booth, and improve the PA system. It was renamed in his honor. For a year, Angie tried to resume a normal life. Then one day she gave up. I'm moving to Philadelphia for a while. I can't stay here. Everywhere I look, I see him. Billy, now 10, cried for 2 days. I shed my tears alone. Angie had been my rock for 8 years. I had never felt more lost than when she left. She handed me the keys. Watch over the farm. Every few weeks I'd visit, starting her small tractor to keep it running, checking the house, making sure the lights and plumbing were okay. She left the power on and installed a top-tier security system. Meanwhile, I focused on Billy, who was reaching the age where friends became his world. I knew it wouldn't be long before he outgrew me. Our home naturally became the gathering spot for his friends, with at least 3 of them around at any given time. I made it a point to know each of them and their parents, inviting them over and chatting during pickups. Some of the mothers were divorced, and I casually dated 1 or 2. A few wanted something more, especially one, but I wasn't looking for anything serious. I was in great shape, financially secure, and owned everything outright. Business was thriving. I had expanded my franchise restaurant to 4 locations, each with a fleet of trucks serving nearby towns. As demand grew, I found another small town in need of equipment and opened another store. Myra's husband took over management, finally free from having to entertain his boss, except when he chose to. Sherry, however, wasn't as fortunate. Without her usual equipment deals, her business faltered. Her head chef left to start her own restaurant, and soon, customers dwindled. Eventually, she had no choice but to close. She took a job as an office manager at a large insurance firm and married a lawyer. That lasted 18 months until he caught her cheating. Now she's still working and engaged again. I hope it lasts this time. She visits Billy mostly on holidays and birthdays. By then, I was busy opening my 6th restaurant, often traveling. While I was away, Sarah stayed with Billy, ensuring he was cared for. When I returned, they greeted me with wide smiles. "What's going on?" I asked, glancing down to make sure my fly wasn't open. "We have a visitor," Sarah said. And then, there she was, Angie. She ran into my arms, sobbing as she held me tight. We spoke at least once a month, and I could always hear the sadness in her voice. Every conversation ended the same way. I'd ask her to come home. This time she had. "How long are you staying?" I asked. "Hopefully another 30 or 40 years. She smiled through her tears. "I'm home, Will, and I'm not leaving. I'm tired of city parks just to see grass. Tired of living next to strangers I don't care to know. I want to see stars, not smog. I want to see you and Billy every day." She squeezed my hand. "I can't believe how tall he's gotten. He'll be taller than you soon. I want to visit Mira, see the guys at the driving range, be with my real friends." By then, she was crying against my shoulder. For the first time in 2 years, I felt truly happy. We cleaned up her house, and week by week, she regained her strength. Riding her tractor, working in the garden, reclaiming the life she had missed. Sarah moved into a nearby nursing home with a 1-bedroom apartment. But when she was unexpectedly upgraded to a larger unit, she was shocked. Even more so when I told her to send the bills to me. She protested, but I stood firm. "I'm taking care of it," I said. "You've been there for Billy and me countless times. This is just me returning the favor. You deserve a bigger space so Billy can visit comfortably." She tried to argue, but I ended the discussion with a smile. A happy grandma is what he needs. From then on, we had dinner together every night, alternating between our homes. 3 months later, Angie and I started spending more time together. Movies, concerts, even a little dancing. One visit to Ben's old firm left her in tears. They still invited us to events, treating her like family. She always denied we were dating, insisting we were just old friends. But one evening, as we sat on the porch swing, watching Billy and his friends race their four-wheelers, I stopped the swing and turned to her. "Marry me," I said. She blinked, stunned. "What?" "Marry me. I've loved you for years. And I know you love me, even if you won't admit it." Tears welled in her eyes. "But our age. I don't care that you're 50 and I'm 43. I love you, and I will until the day I die." She sniffled. "This feels like an ultimatum." "Marry me," I said, "or I swear on Ben's memory, I'll never ask again. Yes or no, right now." Silence. My heart sank. I started to rise when I suddenly felt her hand grip mine. We lost our balance, tumbling down the steps just as Billy ran over. He helped Angie up as she wiped her tears. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, smiling. "I just got some great news. In a few days or weeks, I'll officially be your mom. I hope that makes you happy." Billy didn't hesitate. "You've always been my mom," he said, voice steady. "Now I can finally say it. I love you, Mom." Our wedding was talked about for years. Mira outdid herself organizing it. We married in the spring in a meadow on the farm, with a grand castle tent for the reception. Most of Ben's old colleagues came, and even Sophie, who was visiting her parents, attended. She hugged Angie, beaming. "You're lucky," she said. From the look she gave me, I knew I had some explaining to do. Our friends from the racetrack restored Angie's beloved car and presented it as a wedding gift. Life moved forward, filled with happiness. Billy graduated college, got married, and started a business with his wife. We gifted them my old house, fully renovated. They blessed us with 3 grandchildren, and their first son was named Bennett. Sometimes Angie grew quiet thinking of Ben. On what would have been their 50th anniversary, I surprised her with an oil portrait of him, painted by a renowned artist. She cried for 2 hours before we hung it above the fireplace. That night, as the fire crackled and Angie played with our youngest granddaughter, I glanced at the portrait, and for just a moment, I could have sworn Ben was smiling.